So welcome back from the tea break, and welcome to those that are arriving. Welcome to Parinirvana Day, and yeah, in a minute I'll begin the talk. It's quite scary being spotlighted. Okay, so let's begin. So welcome to Parinirvana Day 2021 via Zoom. And so today we're going to be marking the death of the Buddha, and I'm going to try and evoke the last few months of the Buddha's life. And we're going to be doing that by exploring the Pali Canon. Now, some may find the Pali Canon a bit dry, not all, and perhaps a touch repetitive. But I think if one brings in the imaginative element, and we kind of just be open-hearted and bring a kind of receptivity into the text, it can be really actually quite moving, and we can find real life going on in the Pali Canon. Maybe a bit like a novel that really moves us. It can be kind of read almost like a story, a visual story. Yeah. So yeah, do try and engage as best we can. Yeah. And to say something about Parinirvana Day, it's not an occasion of grief. Of course, we're going to be remembering those that we've lost over the past year or so, and yeah, people have already spoken this morning about some people they've lost, and we will be bringing them to mind, as is our tradition. But actually, Parinirvana Day is something to be celebrated, as of course all our festival days are. So yeah, we of course may still be grieving, so maybe if we can keep our hearts open for the day, and during the puja perhaps we can find some solace through our practice. The account of the Buddha's last days are found in the Parinirvana Sutra, or that's Sanskrit, or the Parinirvana Sutta in Pali. So you may come across various translations, and I'm going to be using quite a classical translation. And yeah, it's found in the Digha Nikaya for those that want to do some research. It's the longest sutra in the Pali Canon, and includes, maybe, you know, even rounds up many of the Buddha's core teachings. And so there's lots of anecdotes during the sutta of the Buddha in action, if you like. So you see him moving from town to town, meeting the Sangha, as he's done for the last 45 years of his life since his enlightenment, just teaching Dharma. And he continues to do that quite extraordinarily, right up until the age of 80. So the title of the Parinirvana Sutta, or the Parinirvana Sutta, the Great Parinirvana Sutta, is sometimes translated as the Discourse on the Great Decease. But Parinirvana means something like the final nirvana. So it's the point at which the Buddha's enlightenment finds its full fruition, and the cycles of life and death are fully transcended. So just to sort of clarify a bit, an enlightened being is still alive. They still, although they've overcome all their past karma, they still have the karma of having a human body. So it's said at the point of enlightenment, at the point of full parinirvana, the going beyond, enlightenment becomes without remainder. And you can explore this more in the Vishuddhimagga text, should you so wish. And I suggest that perhaps it was only then, at the Buddha's final nirvana, at his final resting place, when he's lying, we'll come to this story, but he'll be found lying between twin sala trees, lying on his right side in lion pose at this great age of 80, and perhaps we'll reflect back a bit to a time when, shortly after the Buddha's enlightenment, and he's gained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree at the age of 35. And as he's leaving Bodh Gaya, he meets somebody walking along the road, and it's quite a famous story, but actually I think it kind of fully brings out actually the Buddha's fruition. So I'll tell the story. So the Buddha was met by an ascetic called Apaka, and as they met on the road from Bodh Gaya, so the Buddha's very recently enlightened, he's quite taken back by the appearance of this serene being, and he asked him, well, who's your teacher? Whose teaching do you follow? He's sort of clearly impressed, and the Buddha replies, I have no teacher. One like me does not exist in all the world, for I am the peerless teacher, the Arahat. I alone am supremely enlightened, quenching all defilements, Nirvana's claim that I have attained. I go to the city of Benares to set in motion the wheel of the Dharma. In a world where blindness reigns, I shall beat the deathless drum. And so we could say that Parinirvana Day, we are hearing the deathless drum beating. For the Buddha's teachings are still alive today, even here on Zoom in Colchester, some 2,500 years later. So let's just go back together to the time of the Buddha, to this, to the setting of the Parinirvana Sutta over 2,500 years ago, to the dusty plains of northeast India and Nepal, the Shakyan kingdom, and we find Buddha and Ananda traveling together on foot, as they always did, towards the capital city of Kapilavastu, the home where the Buddha, the pre-Buddha, Siddhartha, spent his first 29 years of his life. But of course, now the Buddha is old, he's just coming up, maybe in turned 80, and he kind of describes himself as a worn-out cart. And he says, just as a worn-out cart is kept going with repairs, so it seems my body too is like this, only kept going by repairs. So this isn't the Buddha we visualize, or the images perhaps we see on shrines or of paintings of a young, strong man. Really, here he's presented as a very elderly man, ravaged by living outside in India, and he's obviously over his life he's practiced many great austerities, and he's continued tirelessly working, teaching Dharma, moving from town to town, from village to village, meeting potentially thousands of people. So let's imagine him, and I'm going to bring an image that it's a painting actually by a friend, Amalaketu, who this is I first saw this image when she just finished painting at the Birmingham Buddhist Centre, and it kind of shows here, I hope you can see it okay, that the relationship between Buddha and Ananda, and they're clearly smiling at each other and in accord with each other, maybe engaged in delightful communication, or maybe just spending time in silence together, and just almost, it seems to me, a kind of mutual respect between each other. They're close friends. Ananda's been the Buddha's personal attendant for the last 25 years of his life, and also was his first cousin, so one assumes he knew him also pre-enlightenment. And that image is available with there's postcards of it and so forth. So if you're moved by that, as I was. So as the journey unfolds, the Buddha we find spending time in retreat, and during the monsoon he spends time in a place called Veligama. I guess that place doesn't exist anymore, and he's just left the Visali area which has been suffering from famine. So, suffering is ripe. And here the Buddha expresses his wish to speak to the Sangha once more. And the Buddha had grown seriously ill in Vesali, much to the concern of his disciples. And in fact, Ananda thought that actually the Buddha was then going to give his final instructions before his death. And he was looking forward to this sort of new and final teaching, this final exhortation, as it were. However, the Buddha says, I've taught you everything you need. I've not held anything back. I've not kept anything secret from anybody. And he says to Ananda that he shouldn't think, and be reliant upon a teacher as such, not even himself. He talks about, that one should not rely on, a teacher, as it were, even himself, the Tathagata, which he, will hear that word quite a lot. The Tathagata means something like here is thus gone. Also, it can be even one who has thus arrived, implying kind of the historical Buddha was one of many of the past Buddhas and one of the many future Buddhas that go on to teach after gaining enlightenment. And he gives Ananda a very important teaching. Now I am frail Ananda, old, aged, forgone in years. This is my 80th year, and my life is spent. Even as an old cart, Ananda, is held together with much difficulty, so the body of the Tathagata is kept going only with supports. It is Ananda only when the Tathagata, disregarding external objects, with the cessation of certain feelings, attains to and abides in the sinus concentration of mind, that his body is more comfortable. So he's clearly, in pain, but goes into this higher state of consciousness to go beyond his suffering. And he says, and this is often repeated teaching, therefore, Ananda, be islands unto yourselves, refuges unto yourselves, seeking no external refuge. With the Dharma as your island, the Dharma as your refuge, seeking no other refuge. So here the Buddha is saying that we have more than we need. We have everything. And in today, perhaps more than ever, we've got plenty of teachings, we've got Google at hand. We can listen to talks from all sorts of teachers, all sorts of traditions. But here he's saying we've got more than we need. And in fact, I would echo that, actually, if we just practice what we already know, even if we've only been coming along to the center for a short time, we too can just find peace in the Dharma, simply reflecting on the practice of ethics, practicing ethics, meditation, reflecting on the Buddha's teachings. We have everything we need. So the Buddha continues his journey and re-emphasizes his teachings. Yeah, so he's not, as I say, he's not giving these new exciting teachings. He recovers things that he's taught multiple times. The Four Noble Truths come up in the sutta, the 4 specific attainments, the 7 conditions for the welfare of the Sangha, the causes of earthquakes, the 8 assemblies, the 8 fields of mastery, and the 8 liberations. So these teachings he's repeated throughout his life. And I'm just going to have a quick look at one of these teachings. I think it's quite relevant today. And that was the one of the ones I mentioned, the 7 conditions that lead to the welfare of the Sangha. Because here we are as a Sangha practicing together, even though we're on Zoom, and many of us have not met face to face, but still we are a Sangha, maybe a 21st century Sangha. So what are these 7 conditions that lead to the welfare of the Sangha? Well, number 1 is to meet in large numbers. So even on Zoom, we can come and meet in large numbers. There was over 180 order members meeting this morning on Zoom, practicing together, and I've certainly noticed our classes are becoming fuller. On some occasions, we've even had over 50 people coming to our classes. So we are really starting to come in large numbers, and perhaps Zoom is a way of enabling that, you know, gives people opportunity to come to the classes from wherever they are, well, even from Ireland. The second point is to meet in harmony. So it's not enough just to meet, but it's to meet in harmony, in friendliness. In the sutra, it says in peace. So that means that we need to work to resolve any difficulties that may arise. And, you know, even in the Sangha, problems arise, difficulties arise. Communication is not always easy. So it's part of our practice to try and resolve any difficulties, any communication issues, and not run away or push people away, but to try and work on these issues as they arise. The third point he makes is to be in accord with the precepts. So this morning we chanted the refuges and precepts, and as we do in many other contexts in my chapter, each week we always chant the refuges and precepts to begin the meeting, as it were, to remind us of what we have in common, what brings us together. Number 4, I particularly like this, but I didn't write it, is to respect the elders of the Sangha, those senior members of the Sangha, those perhaps who've been ordained a longer time. I didn't make that up. Number 5 is to work to eliminate craving. So we all need support sometimes. And in order to get the support we need to be honest with each other, be open about our stuff. So we need to be open with our spiritual friends. You know, we've all had times when we've been drawn, you know, addictive behavior or craving or gone through tough times. So if we really want to be open to the spiritual community, to that, what it offers, we need to be truthful and honest. Number 6 is interesting. It's cherish the forest depths. So I can only take this as something like it's important to go off and be alone on occasion, to practice perhaps in solitary conditions, and perhaps, you know, to make our lives more simple, and maybe to dedicate more of our life to a life of practice. And number 7 is to establish oneself in mindfulness. And he gives a reason why one should establish oneself in mindfulness. It's to welcome those who come, and that those already here may live in peace. So one of the things I've really missed about the Colchester Buddhist Centre not being physically able to attend these classes is the opportunity to welcome newcomers to the centre and to make them feel at home. We've sort of developed a great reputation here in Colchester of making people feel really welcome, really comfortable and at ease when they come to the centre. I mean, I think we've actually managed to do that and continued that even on Zoom. And I know that people have felt welcomed into our Sangha, which is, yeah, really wonderful. And it's great to see so many people that have only just been coming on a short while joining us for the day. So these are the 7 conditions that lead to the welfare of the Sangha. And this is important because it's one of the teachings that the Buddha taught, you know, in his last days. So he really is thinking about the welfare of the Sangha, the community, that it continues after he dies. And as we hear in all of the Buddhist teachings, they're all very practical, very down to earth. The core teachings, very basic. You know, he teaches, as I mentioned, you know, ethics, meditation, wisdom, the threefold path. So he doesn't give more deeper, more esoteric teachings, but he just gives us more and more of the basics, reiterating the message. He spent his whole life communicating, so he keeps things to the core that anybody can practice. So we don't need esoteric teachings about formlessness or mystical teachings. We just need to stick to the precepts. We just need to practice mindfulness. We just need to practice metta. We just need to keep reflecting on the three lakshanas, seeing them in our lives, that all things, life conditioned life is subject to suffering, that all things are impermanent, that all compounded things are insubstantial, and just seeing them and reflecting upon them. So let's just get back to the Buddhist journey as he's going from town to town giving these teachings until we travel to his final resting place. So the Buddha's final journey was to Kusinara. It is now called Kushnagar, a small remote village, and it's described by Ananda as a mud-walled town, a miserable place in the back of beyond. And yes, some of us have been there. We've been there on pilgrimage, and it is a bit of a mud-walled town in the back of beyond. So I'm going to share a few photos from a couple of pilgrimages I managed to have the opportunity to come. This is my favourite cafe. That if you are in Kushnagar or Kusinara as it was at the time of the Buddha, the Yama Cafe, they do great Tibetan momos. I highly recommend, and their chips aren't bad either. So here is the final resting place of some of the ashes. So I'm not going to go into it today, but suffice to say, after the Buddha died, there was quite a hoo-ha as to where and who's going to have the ashes. And some of the ashes are underneath this stupa, and there's some of us circumnavigating that stupa, keeping it on the right-hand side, as is traditional to keep things like stupas, and Buddha's always keeping it to the right out of respect. Here is the inside of the Mahaparinirvana temple. This is the place where we practice together to practice inside the temple. And here's the outside of the temple with some of us moving up to pay our respects and to practice. In fact, I'll just say a very brief story that when we were on pilgrimage more recently, about 10 years ago now, well, I think I've got a picture of some of us. There we go. These are some of the people that were on pilgrimage together. You'll recognise some faces. Yeah, when we went into that shrine, we were chanting the Tiratna as we do each morning at 7 o'clock. And yeah, in that shrine, it was interesting and beautiful that some of monks and nuns from other traditions joined in with us, joined in chanting with us. Yeah, so that was really quite moving. Yes. Yeah, and there's us outside the stupa receiving teachings. I'm not sure who is giving the teaching that day or doing the reading, but yeah, we were there. And I'm not sure what else I've got there. I've got a few. This is when I went with Akasha Hridaya back in 2003, my first pilgrimage. Someone may recognise to the right Loka Bandhu giving teachings, and this was with the Croydon Sangha. And there is the man himself outside of the stupa with his white cloth, maybe a would-be order member there, looking out most profoundly into the sky. So yeah, wonderful days. And yeah, the Buddha speaks in this sutta about going on pilgrimage, and he says that actually we should all, if we have the opportunity, to visit these 4 sites associated with the Buddha. And these 4 traditional sites are where the Buddha was born in Lumbini in Nepal now, where the Buddha got enlightened in Bodh Gaya, and where the Buddha first taught the Dharma, which is in Sarnath now, and of course where the Buddha obtained his parinirvana. And he says, interestingly, that whoever should die on such a pilgrimage with his heart established in faith will be reborn in a realm of heavenly happiness. So fortunately, nobody's died on the pilgrimages I've been on, although there have been a few close shaves, perhaps stories for another time. But I think one thing about being in India and traveling around India is how fragile life is and how life and death are so intermingled. So you've got this whole rush of Indian life, people racing from place to place. And it's very bright, very loud, and you know, bright with people's smiles and their clothes, but also loud with traffic and diesel smells and cars tooting. And, you know, we see daily in India poverty, disease, even death. yeah, the capital cities of India are just full of so much extremes. I remember when I was traveling, just seeing this poster showing this a wonderful apartment where one could live for just a few thousand, 100,000 lakhs, you know, this amazing latest modcon, the widescreen TV kind of facility, and a young couple, you know, just clearly enjoying their life. But actually that poster was above a very dusty street, and there were just slums along the side of the road where people were just living, you know. So yeah, real extremes of what is presented and what reality is. So in each of these places that, you know, we've traveled to on pilgrimage and traveled throughout India, they've all kind of got their own energy. And I think the spirit of Kusinara is different from the other places of pilgrimage that I've been on. It's a very still place, a place of calm, a place of reflection. So it hasn't got that hustle and bustle of Bodh Gaya when you leave the temple grounds, and it's just really full on. And perhaps Sarnath the same, and even Lumbini. It's perhaps visited less than the other holy sites, and it's got a kind of, yeah, this real sense of calm when one walks to the shrine to pay homage and returns. And the Buddha reminds us actually in his teaching to Ananda from the sutta that, you know, like all things are impermanent, all things come and go. Even that applies to towns and cities, even civilizations. So when the Venerable Ananda spoke to the Blessed One saying, "Let it not be, Lord, that the Blessed One should pass away in this mean place, this uncivilized township in the midst of the jungle, a mere outpost of the province. There are great cities, Lord, such as Kampa, Rajgir, Savatthi, Sakata, and Kasambi. Let the Buddha pass away here in one of those. For in these cities dwell many wealthy nobles and Brahmins and householders who are devotees of the Tathagata, and they'll render due honor to the remains." And the Buddha just says, "Say not so, Ananda, say not so. This mean place, this uncivilized township, was in times long past, this realm was looked after by a king by the name of Mahasudarsana, who was a universal monarch, a king of righteousness, a conqueror of the four quarters of the earth. And that king had his royal residence here at Kusinara, which was then called Kusavati, and it extended 12 yojanas from east to west and 7 from north to south. The capital was prosperous and well populated, much frequented by people, and it was abundantly provided with food. So just as the royal residence of the deities is mighty, prosperous and well populated, much frequented by deities and abundantly provided with food, so was this royal capital of Kusavati. And he goes on just to say that day and night, the city was, had these 10 sounds going on: trumpets of elephants, neighing of horses, chariots, beating of drums and tabours, music, song, cheers, the clapping of hands and cries of eat, drink and be merry. And so it was, of course, then that Ananda realised, and so they set out on their final journey to Kusinara. And when they arrive, the Buddha goes with Ananda to the Malasala grove, and he asked that Ananda to set up a couch so he can lie in lion's pose with his head to the right. So here is the Buddha, his disciples and lay people in lion pose on the right hand side, still mindful and clearly comprehending. And it said that Ananda, when he saw this, he went into the Vihara and leaned against the doorpost and wept. "I am still but a learner and still have to strive for my own perfection. But alas, my master, who was so compassionate towards me, so kind to me, is about to pass away." And it said the Buddha called out, "Where, bhikkhus, is Ananda?" And the Venerable Ananda Lord has gone into the Vihara, and there he's standing against the door post and weeping. Then the Blessed One asked the Bhikkhu to bring Venerable Ananda to him, saying, "Go, Bhikkhu, bring Ananda to me." And the Bhikkhu goes and asks Ananda to come as the Master is calling. And he goes to the Buddha. And the Buddha simply says, "Enough, Ananda, do not grieve, do not lament, for have I not taught from the very beginning that all that is dear and beloved, there must be change, separation, severance, of that which is born, come into being compounded and subject to decay. How can one say, may it not come to dissolution? There can be no such state of things. Now for a long time, Ananda, you have served the Tathagata with loving kindness in deed, word and thought, graciously, pleasantly, with a whole heart and beyond measure. Great good you have gathered, Ananda. Now you should put forth energy, and soon you too will be free from the taints." So it's interesting, isn't it, that what really stands out for Ananda isn't his great teachings or his supernatural powers. It's his Buddhist kindness that stands out, his master that was so kind. And and interestingly, after that in the sutta, the Buddha then just goes on to rejoice in Ananda, which I think again is so important and so shows who the Buddha really was, and he rejoices. And I'm just going to read these 4 qualities that the Buddha brings to mind. He says, if bhikkhus being monks, a company of bhikkhus should go to see Ananda, they become joyful on seeing him. And if he then speaks to them of the Dharma, they are made joyful by his discourse. And when he becomes silent, they are disappointed. So it is also when bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen or laywomen go to see Ananda, they become joyful on seeing him. And if he then speaks of them of Dharma, they are made joyful by his discourse. And when he becomes silent, they are disappointed. So let me just... So we come now to the final Parinirvana. And we have a sense here of the whole area coming alive, nature coming alive, nature blossoming. And it said, even though it wasn't the time of year for the trees and flowers to blossom, the sutta kind of just evokes this so beautifully, because it says, and you can read this, at the time the twin sala trees broke out into full bloom, but it was not the season of flowering, and the blossoms rained upon the body of the Tathagata and dropped and scattered and were strewn upon it in worship of the Tathagata. And celestial mandava flowers, heavenly sandalwood powder from the sky, ran down upon the body of the Tathagata and dropped and scattered and were strewn upon it in worship of the Tathagata. And the sound of heavenly voices and heavenly instruments made music in the air out of reverence for the Tathagata. And now the sutta just builds up to the final Parinirvana. As I say, this isn't the end of the sutta, but we will look at that another day. But so I'm just going to read from the Buddha's final exhortation, because the Blessed One speaks to Ananda saying, it may be, Ananda, that to some among you the thought will come, ended is the word of the Master, we have a Master no longer, but it should not be, Ananda, so considered. He says, if bhikkhus, any of you are in doubt or perplexity about my teaching about the Buddha, the Dhamma or the Sangha or the path, then ask. Don't be of thought the Master was with us face to face, yet face to face we failed to ask him. And it said all the bhikkhus were silent, and the Buddha asked again and a third time. And and he just double checks. He says, well, you may not want to ask out of respect, so do tell a friend and they can ask on your behalf. And again the bhikkhus were silent. And Ananda just explains, marvelous it is, O Lord, most wonderful it is, This faith I have in the community of bhikkhus, that not even one bhikkhu is in doubt or perplexity as to the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha. And the Buddha simply replies, out of faith, Ananda, you speak thus. But here, Ananda, the Tathagata knows for certain that among this community of bhikkhus, there is not even one bhikkhu who is in doubt as to the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha, or the path of practice. For Ananda, among these 500 bhikkhus, even the lowest is a stream enterer, secure from downfall, assured and bound for enlightenment. And it said the Buddha then addresses the bhikkhus, saying, behold now, bhikkhus, I exhort you. All compounded things are subject to vanish. Strive on with mindfulness. And these were the last words of the Buddha. And the sutta just describes him traveling through the dhyanas and gently passing away. And then there was a tremendous earthquake, thunders crashing down. And we're just left with the scene that those that were yet freed from passion lifted up their arms and wept, flinging themselves to the ground, crying, too soon has the Blessed One come to his Parinirvana. Too soon the Happy One came to his Parinirvana. Too soon the eye of the world vanished from sight. But it said that the bhikkhus who were freed from passion, who were mindful and clearly comprehending, reflected in this way. Impermanent are all compounded things. How could it be any other way? So perhaps I'm going to end it here, seeing that even the Buddha passes away. We cannot say where, of course. So we need to really heed the Buddha's final advice to strive on mindfully, for none of us know how much time we have. We can never be sure. For example, if we told we'd just got a few months left to live, what would we do? We may reflect, as one of the four reminders tells us, to reflect on this precious opportunity, this life that we have, an opportunity to make up something of our lives, given that we have enough health and energy, that we found the Dharma, and that we found an effective Sangha. Yeah, can we ask ourselves, are we making the most of this precious opportunity? Let's be honest, so much time we waste. So let's commit ourselves to practicing as fully as we can. So I'm just going to end with a beautiful poem, which is a reminder of both beauty and impermanence, from Kukai, a 9th century Japanese monk and founder of the Shingon school. So it's entitled Kukai's Letter to a Nobleman in Kyoto. You ask me why I entered the mountain deep and cold, awesome, surrounded by steep peaks and grotesque rocks, a place that is painful to climb and difficult to descend, wherein reside the gods of the mountains and the spirits of trees. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen the peach and plum blossoms in the royal garden? They must be in full bloom, pink and fragrant, now opening in the April showers, now falling in the spring gales. Flying high and low, all over the garden the petals scatter. Some sprigs may be plucked by the strolling spring maidens, and the flying petals picked by the flittering spring orioles. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen the water gushing up in the divine spring of the garden? No sooner does it arise than it flows away forever. Thousands of shining lines flow as they come forth, flowing, flowing, flowing into an unfathomable abyss. Turling, whirling again, they flow on forever. And no one knows where they will stop. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen that billions have lived in China, in Japan? None have been immortal from time immemorial. Ancient sage kings or tyrants, good subjects or bad, fair ladies and homely, who could enjoy eternal youth? Noble men and lowly alike, without exception, die away. They all have died, reduced to dust and ashes. The singing halls and dancing stages have become the abodes of foxes, transient as dreams, bubbles or lightning, all are perpetual travellers. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen? This has been man's fate. How can you alone live forever? Thinking of this, my heart feels torn. You too are like the sun going down behind the western mountains, or a living corpse whose span of life is nearly over. Futile would be my stay in the capital. Away, away I must go. I must not stay here. Release me, for I shall be a master of the great void, a child of Shingon, must not stay there. I have never tired of watching the pine trees and the rocks of Mount Kaya. The limpid stream of the mountain is the source of my inexhaustible joy. Discard pride in earthly gains. Do not be scorched in the burning house, the triple world. Discipline in the woods alone lets us soon enter the eternal realm. So thank you very much for joining us for the talk.